Yeah, oh, it is 9:47. Look at that. I think we Bob and I are chatting about something right now. So welcome all of you all. Glad that you are here. I think we're letting folks jump on for another minute or two. I will say that we are back at the church this morning for the very first time on Sundays in forever. We've got a small group that will be worshiping with us in the sanctuary this morning as sort of a test run of our live stream capability. And it feels like the first day of school. Like I got up really early, like I got here, no one else was here. I thought, I don't even remember what time. I mean, how do you do this? Like, anyway, we're excited and glad to be here. And that may mean that, that I jump off a little early and Nancy finishes the class. Anyway, we'll figure it all out as we go along. But we are so grateful that we've reached this point where it feels a little more complicated to do Zoom and in person. So welcome. Anybody have questions about that, about our live streaming plans?
We need to register, is that correct?
Yeah, right now there will be registration. So
Okay.
this week we've got some folks that registered, and I think the invitation was mostly to session members to try to help us work out some of the kinks. And next week too, it's a small group. But then I think the plan is after that that other people can register, and there will be a process online to do that.
Okay.
And anybody at home can also watch it live streaming.
Absolutely, yeah. On you can do what you've been doing. Go to our home. Go to the click the link and go to the page and watch it on YouTube there with your bulletin, just like you have been doing. We hope. That's the plan. And then it will still be recorded and available later in the day. It won't be an instant recording. It takes a little time to process and upload, but if you miss it at 11 a.m., you can still watch it later in the day. All right. Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for all the services that you all have recorded, week after week after week. You got better and better and better. And it's a vital part of our Sunday morning, even though we're at home and even to this day. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Alice. A lot of work and staff and volunteers and Angela Drummond, if y'all see her, thank her, because we couldn't do what we're doing without her and some of our other volunteers. Yeah, so I hope we get better and better at the live stream too, because it feels like we're kind of starting over, doing it a different way. Let me say one more thing before, because I'm going to have to jump off a little early. Next week, Creation Care is going to help us with our class. Thank you, Jane. And then the week after that, we start a 4-week series on nurturing faith in children and youth. And that is for everybody. It's not just for parents or grandparents or, it's for the whole church. So hope you'll plan to join us for those 4 weeks in May, when we'll really dig into those vows that we take when we baptize children and our strategic goal of nurturing faith and how we do that as a church together. I'm excited about that series. So, okay, Bob, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Let's open our program with a word of prayer, please. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to gather together. Teach us what we need to know to hear your voice and to learn from the saints that have come before us and that are among us now. In thy name we pray. Amen. Well, I want to share the screen and I'm working. Okay, I get into PowerPoint here. Okay. This is a little surprise to me, but let's just start in with a story. This is a story. Let's see. I'm going to have to stop here because I can't get into presenter view, which is what I'm looking for. I had this all worked out last night.
It's no reflection on you, Bob. Zoom is just
Okay,
weird sometimes.
now,
That looks good.
almost there. Okay. Not quite. Okay, here we go. Antony of Egypt and Paul of Thebes were both saints, two men who were famous for their holy solitude. This painting portrays them. The one on the left is Antony and Paul is the one on the right, when they meet for the first and only time. Antony is visiting Paul in front of the cave where Paul lived. This is in Egypt, but different parts of Egypt. Paul on the right was 24 years older than Antony, and they did not know each other until their lives were almost over. Paul is known as the first Christian hermit over here. Around 250 AD, he fled to the desert for to escape the persecution of Emperor Decius. And he lived in a cave. This is the cave near a palm tree. This doesn't look much like a palm tree, but a spring down here. And it gave him clothes and water. For his clothes, he would weave the leaves of the palm. And for his food, he would eat the palm fruit. And he spent most of his day in prayer, and he just lived there by himself. When he was in his early 40s, ravens began to bring him bread every day. And Paul actually lived there by himself until his death at about age 115. Now, this is the raven bringing the bread to Paul as it did every day since his mid-40s, but that looks to me suspiciously like a Krispy Kreme donut. But God provided one way or another. Not long before Paul's death, Antony had a dream and was told about Paul. So Antony, who was 91 years old at the time, sought Paul out. And when they met, they talked for a full day and a full night together. So it was a strong, immediate friendship, but it was very short. On Antony's next visit, he found Paul's body. Paul had just died, and Antony dug him in a grave. You can see that little story over here. And the story is that Antony had help digging the grave from 2 lions who came there and dug the grave that Antony buried him in. Okay, now that's not the kind of holy solitude that we normally think of. The hermit life is not for most of us, but we'll get to Antony later and talk now about some of the book that we looked at as a group. Let's see, adjust this a bit. This is the book, Holy Solitude. It's a collection of daily devotionals. It's not a book about saints necessarily. It's a collection of devotionals for the 6 weeks preceding Easter. And each meditation draws upon 1 or 2 biblical or non-biblical characters to illustrate various types of holy solitude and its use by and impact upon Christians throughout the centuries. Examples of Moses, John the Baptist, and Jesus, as well as Antony the Great, Benedict of Nursia, Julian of Norwich, and Alice, I enjoyed your meditation 2 or 3 days ago on Julian of Norwich, and Catherine of Siena. Each week, Haverkamp's devotionals interpret holy solitude as it appears in a different context, the context of struggle, the context of listening, journeying, and hospitality. So holy solitude can play a part and is evident in those different contexts. And each week, the author invited the reader to engage in 1 or 2 complementary practices associated with holy solitude. So those include silence, meditation, fasting, journaling, almsgiving, walking, and spiritual retreat. Thus, by the end of the book, the readers have been given not only a broad definition of holy solitude, but also several ways to apply it to their own faith journeys. I'm going to leave the book as a collection of devotionals because that would not do much for us in this kind of a meeting. But what I've done is to extract some insights that I personally gained during the series of the Lenten series, but also that people in the group, many of whom are here with us this morning, talked about in the devotional time. And so I owe a lot to them for these insights. The first one is that loneliness is a subjective feeling. Loneliness is not necessarily being alone. And it's a feeling of isolation, a feeling of separation. And almost all of it, I would be very surprised if there's no one in this group who hasn't felt lonely at one time or another. And it's normal for most people, but if prolonged, it can lead to depression. But here in these pictures, loneliness is illustrated, the feeling is illustrated by
a hotel room by yourself.
By shut windows, by empty seats, and by unseen barriers. You can see the closed windows here and here, and empty seats, and people who are isolated socially and separate. So when we're lonely, we're hungry for meaningful interaction with other peoples. And these people's minds are on their own hunger. Someone described loneliness as failed solitude. loneliness is failed solitude. Now, solitude, on the other hand, has a similarity with loneliness in that often people are by themselves or feel by themselves, but unlike loneliness, solitude is a state of being. It's not a feeling. It's being alone without being lonely. In solitude, the separation is put to good use. It becomes productive. It refreshes us. So a couple of people here are reading. This one looks like he or she is writing. This one is just resting or daydreaming. So it's productive. Now, theologian Paul Tillich said that our language has wisely sensed these two sides of man's being alone. It has created the word loneliness to express the pain of being alone, and it has created the word solitude to express the glory of being alone. And I think that's what we want to talk about today, really, the glory of being alone. Tillich has a chapter on that in one of his books. Now, these two pictures, in fact, could be the same young woman at different times. Of course, they're not, but you could imagine them like this at different times. Now, I wanted to say something before we go on about Jesus' loneliness and Jesus' solitude, because he experienced both. And I thought this was a wonderful quotation from Mother Teresa about that I wanted to read to you. When Christ said, "I was hungry and you fed me," he didn't mean only the hunger for bread and for food. He also meant the hunger to be loved. Jesus himself experienced this loneliness. He came amongst his own, and his own received him not. And it hurt him then, and it has kept on hurting him. The same hunger, the same loneliness, the same having no one to be accepted by and to be loved and wanted by. Every human being in that case resembles Christ in his loneliness. And that is the hardest part. That's real hunger. So that's the kind of loneliness that Jesus might have experienced when he was cast out of Nazareth or in the wilderness here or on the cross. But this is Jesus's solitude. And this passage, this little verse from Luke shows that on one of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated as apostles. Now, I'm not going to read this, but Bill Gauthier says here that Jesus used solitude in lots of different ways to prepare for big moments in his life. And it's where he refreshed himself regularly in his ministry. So our first insight really, or my first insight, was that solitude is not an end in itself. We don't seek to be alone simply to be alone. Our aim is physical or mental restoration or productivity. And therefore we choose solitude. Solitude we sometimes seek out just to rest physically. Afternoon naps are one of my favorite whenever I can catch one. Solitude, sometimes we want to escape from something, such as noise or confusion or other distractions, or to escape people who are bothering us or who are giving us problems sometimes. We seek solitude to find something, such as solution to a problem or a resolution of conflict, or to meditate and pray. And I think that we saw that Jesus used solitude for all of these reasons. It was not simply an end in itself. it was physical or mental or spiritual restoration or productivity. Now, in itself, solitude is not holy. There's nothing holy about solitude unless you make it holy. It can become holy in these cases. And so solitude becomes holy when it takes on a spiritual dimension, absent from ordinary solitude. So holy solitude includes communion with God, characterized by hearts and minds that are open to the Holy Spirit. We don't have to be praying uh, in the usual sense of what prayer is, like the man on the right. But as this young nun is doing, we could be reading or studying or praying in different ways. But in either case, there's communion with God characterized by hearts and minds open to the Holy Spirit. Now, it follows then that if we are alone and communicating with God, then we are in holy solitude, regardless of what else we may be doing. Now, there are two things. We have to be alone, or it isn't in solitude, and we have to commune with God, or it isn't holy solitude. So here you have people engaged in different activities, meditating, fishing. Here's St. Jerome writing, these are two angels, so he doesn't even know they're there. Here's a gardener. Here's an oboist out near Brevard, and here's just somebody doing tedious, monotonous, mindless work. Well, Thomas Merton is one of Haverkamp's favorites, and we see her talking about him often. He was a Trappist monk who was based in a monastery in Kentucky. And as a Trappist monk, he was bound to follow the rule of Saint Benedict of Nursia, who founded the Benedictine monks. And they had a daily routine of worship and prayer. And so here are the monks in their daily routine. And their prayer is called an office of prayer. And they follow the same one every day. But these monks, the Trappists, are also expected to do manual labor. At least the Trappist monks are. And that's partly because it would be a time of self-examination and penance for them as they work alone, but also a practical reason, it keeps the monastery self-supporting. So this illustration shows the monks in both parts, both sides of their daily lives. Here they're out working in a forest. And Merton was thinking about this one time when he was out there working in the forest with the monks. Now, you would think that somebody cutting down trees would need to communicate. The monks are not bound by silence, but they do try to keep silence as much as possible. And they've even developed a kind of a sign language to help with this. So even though they were in groups, they were each doing their own thing. In this poem, which is also a prayer, this is what Merton says. Now all our saws sing holy sonnets in this world of timber, where oaks go off like guns and fall like cataracts, pouring their roar into the wood's green well. Walk to us, Jesus, through the wall of trees and find us still adorers in these airy churches, singing our other office with our saws and axes. Still teach your children in the busy forest and let some little sunlight reach us in our mental shades and leafy studies. when time has turned the country white with grain and filled our regions with the threshing sun. Walk to us, Jesus, through the walls of wheat when our two tractors come to cut them down. Sow some light winds upon the acres of our spirit and cool the regions where our prayers are reapers. And slake us, heaven, with your living rivers. I think that's a wonderful poem, and it's so appropriate here. Well, the next insight is that we can learn much about holy solitude from God's people in every age, no matter how strange God's presence in their lives may appear to us today. So the 12 people, actually there are 24 people listed here. These are the saints, rebels, hermits, and prophets that Haverkamp mentions, and she uses at least one of them every day for the devotional. Now, we're all familiar with the biblical characters, Hagar and Moses and Elijah and Daniel and Jonah and Mary and John the Baptist, Jesus, Anna at the temple, Mary Magdalene, Saul of Tarsus, and John of Patmos. We're pretty much familiar with them, and I suspect that each one of us can come up with the reason that Haverkamp included these people in holy solitude. But in church history, these weren't as familiar to me, and some of them are strange. Some of them are downright bizarre, to tell you the truth. And she takes each one of these and talks about how their holy solitude helped them to fulfill God's will for them in their lives. Now, obviously, I don't have time to go over all of them, but as a group, and I'm looking at the 24, 9 of them are women, 15 are men. 12 are saints, 5 of them from the Bible, and 7 from church history. Also, Charles de Foucauld is on schedule to be declared a saint soon. There are 3 martyrs, John the Baptist, Saul of Tarsus, that's Paul the Apostle, and Jesus, of course. But none of these characters are martyrs. You think of the saints and the martyrs, but none of these are. At least 6 of these, not counting the ones in the Bible, at least 6 of them wrote books. And 5 of them were wealthy in their day. That is, Antony the Great was wealthy at one time, Francis of Assisi, Charles de Foucauld, Catherine Doherty, and Thomas Merton were wealthy. All 5 of them gave their money away. And remarkably, at least 19 of them had visions. And I don't know whether Haverkamp never points that out, but I don't know whether she picked them out for that reason or not. But we're going to look at the lives of 3 of these. Antony the Great, the Coracle monks, and Julian of Norwich in that order. I'm going to go through them quickly because we want to be finished in time to go through. But Antony of Egypt, he's the one that we talked about at the beginning with Paul. This is called the tall cross, and it's the sort of the symbol, the icon of Saint Antony of Egypt. He gave his parents' property away and began to practice an ascetic life and lived that way for 15 years. At age 35, he went to the desert in an abandoned Roman fort and was tempted by demons. In fact, he was harshly beaten by them. Haverkamp says he was beaten to a pulp by demons. So whether you take that just literally or not, it was real to him. Around age 55, though, he emerged from solitude and dedicated himself to teaching and organizing many of the monks. He was known to many people of his time and even corresponded with the Emperor Constantine. He died at age 105 and was known as the father of Christian monasticism. St. Paul of Egypt was called the first monk, but Antony was called the father of Christian monasticism. This is one of the temptations of St. Anthony. They are depicted in many works of art. Artists love to draw demons. And these are demons. Sometimes they are seductive women that try to tempt him to sin. Some of them are picture him as frail and naked. But here you see his tall symbol here, and these are the demons that are surrounding him. But he never yielded for that. And for that reason, he's called a saint. Today, you can visit his monastery. This is what it looks like today. It's quite a far cry from that cave. This is another picture of that monastery. I think it would be a really interesting place to visit. So he was 251 to 356, very early, one of the early desert fathers. The coracle monks as a group were Celtic Christians in Ireland in the 6th through the 9th centuries. Now, Haverkamp doesn't name any one of them. She deals with them as part of a group. But these little boats here are the coracles. This is bigger, but the early Celtic monks would get into their little leather boats called coracles, paddle out to sea, pull their oars into the boat and pray, "Spirit, blow me to my place of resurrection." Wherever they landed was to be the place chosen by the Spirit where they would live, share the gospel, and experience their future day of resurrection and the end of their earthly life. Now, one of these might be Brendan the Navigator. You can look him up. He's a saint. Or maybe Columba, who is also a saint. And Columba is known for bringing Christianity to Scotland through the island of Iona around the end of the 6th century. So he was a father of the Scottish church, and therefore the father of Presbyterians. Julian of Norwich was a resident of the town of Norwich, which is north of London, about 120 miles. Her name and her family are unknown. She took the name Julian from the church where she was an anchoress or an anchorite, that is, in the city of Norwich. She was a mystic and a theologian and an anchoress, and the author of the first book written in English by a woman. So she wrote in English. It's what we call Middle English. She was an exact contemporary of Chaucer, but it's in English, and it's also by a woman. The book is Revelation of Divine Love. You can see it here on the statue of her outside the cathedral there. It suggests that she was a lay anchoress rather than a nun. If she had been a nun, she would have known Latin and would have written in Latin, probably. And she may have been a widow whose husband and children had been taken by the Black Death. She sees things different than most nuns would. She would received support from people who would write her into their wills, because she went into a little cell attached to the church and she never came out. And this is what anchoresses and anchorites did. They would go into the cell and stay there. At age 30, she received a series of 16 visions of Christ's passion, and her book is about that. Not long after her recovery, she entered a cell attached to St. Julian's Church and lived there for a long time. These are some pictures of her. This is one of her most saying. She is notable for her focus on Christ's passion and God's love. And her theology was radical for her day. She emphasized the feminine nature of God, which is wonderful and refreshing, but it certainly wasn't orthodox then. I think these are loaves of bread. She could talk to people out throughout the window in her cell, and give them bread, and she could make clothes for them, but she couldn't leave, but she could engage with them, and she did. Okay, let's take about 6 or 7 minutes for a breakout room discussion. And one of the things that you can talk about is maybe one of the following people who participated in the Linton small group might have comments to add or could answer questions, but they're not, they haven't prepared any kind of thing, so they might or they might not. That's Judy and Evelyn and Anne and Fran, Jeremy and Mary Jane and Gail are not here. They're involved in other things, and Sue is here. Okay, the next thing you might want to talk about is, what similarities do you notice in the lives of the people included in Haverkamp's list? Do these similarities provide any insights into the nature of holy solitude? And the third thing you might want to talk about is the following practices. Do some of you want to talk about these that you've experienced? Silence, fasting, meditation, almsgiving, journaling, walking, and so forth. So we'll break up now into the breakout rooms and work on that.
How long you think, Bob? What time you want us to bring people back?
I think 6 minutes or 7 minutes would be good.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna invite you all to breakout rooms.
Okay, is everybody back?
I think so.
I can't tell, so.
Yes, I think all the groups are closed.
Okay. Well, this brings us to insight number 5, it was for me. And that is, in the long run, holy solitude leads to a better understanding of our role in bringing about God's kingdom. So it typically bears its fruit in how we interact with others. It's the contemplative life. Solitude is in the contemplative, invites a contemplative life, but it bears its fruit in the active life. Haverkamp's saints, hermits, prophets, and rebels all chose holy solitude, and some for a very long time. And yet, with one exception, and that is Mary of Egypt, they all re-entered the active life, serving their brothers and sisters in response to their communication with God in solitude. Paul of Thebes was one who Haverkamp did not mention, and he's another exception. But all of them found a way to serve God that was consistent with their individual talents. Now, I don't think you have to be declared a saint to have solitude like this and for it to bear witness in your life. In fact, I think I saw the same kind of wholeness in Les and Cindy Morgan last week. And I would like to have asked them, how did you get away from things when you needed to in Bangladesh? But in holy solitude, these people found in God's presence a wholeness that inspired them to re-enter active life and was apparent to those they met and served. Maybe that was one of the similarities that you saw in this small group. Okay, I want to close with a prayer now, and the prayer is in a video of Mother Teresa's work and of an anthem there. I think you will enjoy it. I think you will love the video. The music is by Renee Clausen. But I'm going to let this close our presentation, and so I'll close out the share screen, but I won't have anything else really to say after we get back. I think this video will say it all.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you to your group that joined us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope to see everybody next week.
Everybody have a good week ahead.
Have a good
Yeah. Beautiful prayer. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
That's holy solitude.
Bye, y'all. Have a good day.